The Empire by Chuang Tzu. Systems of government are many. Each man thinks his own perfect. Where then does what the ancients called the system of Tao come in? There is nowhere where it does not come in. It may be asked whence our spirituality, whence our intellectuality. The true sage is born, the prince is made, yet all proceed from an original one. He who does not separate from the source is one with God. He who does not separate from the essence is a spiritual man. He who does not separate from the reality is a perfect man. He who makes God the source and Teva root and Tao the portal, passively falling in with the modifications of his environment. He is the true sage. He who practices charity as a kindness, and duty to one's neighbor as a principle, ceremony as a convenience, music as a pacificator, and thus becomes compassionately and charitable, he is a superior man. He who regulates his conduct by law, who regards fame as an external adjunct, who versifies his hypothesis, who bases his judgment upon proof, such men rank 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. It is thus that officials rank, in the strict sense of duty, in making food and raiment of paramount importance, in caring for and nourishing the old, the weak, the orphaned, and the widow, they all exemplify the principle of true government. Thus far-reaching was the extension of Tao among the ancients. The companion of the gods, the purifier of the universe, it nourishes all creation, it unites the empire, it benefits the masses. Illuminating the fundamental, it is bound up with the accessory, reaching to all points of a compass and to the opposite extremes of magnitude. There is indeed nowhere where it is not. How it enlightened the polity of past ages is evidenced in the records which historians have preserved to us. Its presence in the canons of poetry, history, reeds, and music has been made clear by many scholars of Chou and Lu. It informs the canon of poetry with its vigor, the canon of history with its usefulness, the canon of reeds with its adaptability, the canon of music with its harmonizing influence, the canon of changes with its mysterious principles, and the spring and autumn with its discriminations. Spread over the whole world, it is focused in the Middle Kingdom, and the learning of old schools renders constant homage to its power. But when the world is disorganized, true sages do not manifest themselves. Tao ceases to exist as one, and the world becomes cognized of the idiosyncrasies of the individual. These are like the senses of hearing, sight, smell, and taste, not common to each organ, or like the skill of various artisans, each excellent of its kind and each useful in its turn, but not equally at the command of all. Consequently, when a mere specialist comes forward and dogmatizes on the beauty of the universe, the principles which underlie all creation, the position occupied by the ancients in reference to the beauty of the universe and the limits of the supernatural, it follows that the Tao of inner wisdom and of outer strength is obscured and prevented from asserting itself. Everyone, alas, regards the course he prefers as the infallible course. The various schools diverge never to meet again, and posterity is debarred from viewing the original purity of the universe into the grandeur of the ancients, for the system of Tao is scattered in fragments over the face of the earth. Not to covet posthumous fame, nor to aim at dazzling the world, nor to pose at the benefactor of mankind, but to be a strict self-disciplinarian while lending into the faults of others, herein lay the Tao of the ancients. Mi Tzu and Qin Hua Li became enthusiastic followers of Tao, but they pushed the system too far, carrying their practice to excess. The former wrote an essay against the music, and another while he entitled Economy. There was to be no singing in life, no mourning after death. He taught universal love and beneficence towards one's fellow man, without contentions, without censure of others. He loved learning, but not in order to become different from others. Yet his views were not those of the ancient sages, whose music and reeds he set aside. The Yellow Emperor gave us the Xian Shi, Yao gave us the Ta Chang, Shun the Ta Shao, Yu the Ta Xia, Tang the Ta Hu, Wen Wang the Piu Yung, Wu Wang and Chao Kung added the Wu. The morning ceremonial of old was according to the estate of each, and determined in proportion to rank. Thus the body of a son of heaven was enclosed in a sevenfold coffin, that of a feudal prince in a fivefold coffin, that of a minister in a threefold coffin, that of a private individual in a twofold coffin. But no Mitsu would have no singing in life, no mourning after death, and a single coffin of all 3 inches in thickness as the rule for all alike. Such doctrines do not illustrate his theory of universal love, neither does his practice of them establish the fact of his own personal self-respect. They may not suffice to destroy his system altogether, though it is unreasonable to prohibit singing and weeping and rejoicing in due season. He would have men toil through life and hold death in contempt, but this teaching is altogether too unattractive. It would land mankind in sorrow and lamentation. It would be next to impossible as a practical system, and cannot, I fear, be regarded as the Tao of a true sage. It would be diametrically opposed to human passions, and as such would not be tolerable by the world. Mitsu himself might be able to carry it out, but not the rest of the world. And when one separates from the rest of the world, his chances of developing an ideal state become small indeed. Mitsu argued in favor of his system as follows. Of old the great Yu drained off a flood of waters and caused rivers and streams to flow through the 9 divisions of the empire and the parts adjected thereto. 300 great rivers, 3,000 branches and streams without number. With his own hand he plied the bucket and dredger in order to reduce confusion to uniformity, until his calves and shins had no hair left upon them. The wind bathed him, the rain calmed him, but he marked out the nations of the world, and was in very truth a sage. And because he thus sacrificed himself to the commonwealth, ages of Mehists to come would also wear short serge jackets and straw sandals, and toil day and night without stopping, making self-mortifications their end and aim, and say to themselves, if we cannot do this, we do not follow the Tao of Yu, and are unworthy to be called Mehists. The disciples of Xiang Li Xian, the followers of the 5 princes, Mehists of the south, such as Ku Ho, Shi Shi, and Tang Ling, all these studied the canon of Mitsu, but their disagreements and agreements were not identical. They called each other schismatics and quarreled over the hard and the wide, the like and unlike, and argued over questions of odd and even. Chuang Tzu was their sage, and they wanted to canonize him as a saint, that they might carry on his doctrines into after ages, even though these differences are not settled. Thus we see that Mitsu and Jin Hua Li, while right in theory, were wrong in practice. They would merely have taught mankind to vie with each other in working the hair of their calves and shins. The evil of its system would have predominated over the good. Nevertheless, Mitsu was undoubtedly a well-meaning man. In spite of failure, with all its withering influences, he stuck to his text. He may be called a man of genius. Not to be involved in the mundane, not to indulge in the specious, not to be overreaching with the individual, nor antagonistic to the public, but to desire the tranquillity of the world in general with a view to the prolongation of life. To seek no more than sufficient for the requirements of oneself and others, and by such a course to purify the heart, herein lay the Tao of the ancients. Sung Xiang and Yin Wen became enthusiastic followers of Tao. They adopted a cap shaped like the Hua mountain as a badge. They bore themselves with kindly discrimination towards all things. They spoke of the passive qualities of the heart as though they had been active, and declared that whosoever could bring joy among mankind and peace within the girdle of ocean should be made ruler over them. They suffered obloquy without noticing the insult. They preserved the people from strife. They prohibited aggression and caused arms to lie unused. They saved a generation from wars and carried their system over the whole empire, to the delight of the high and to the improvement of the lowly. Though the world would have none of them, yet they struggled on and would not give way. Hence it was said that when high and low became tired of seeing them, they intruded themselves by force. In spite of all this, they did too much for others and too little for themselves. Give us, said they, but 5 pins of rice, and it will be enough. The master could not thus eat his fill, but the disciples, although starving, did not forget the world's claims. Day and night they toiled on, saying, must we necessarily live? Shall we act the so-called saviors of mankind? The superior man, they say, is not a fault-finder. He does not appropriate the credit of others. He looks on one who does no good to the world as a worthless fellow. He regards prohibition of aggressive actions and causing arms to lie unused as external, the diminution and restraint of our passions as internal, and all matters great and small, subtle or gross, such the point to which he attains. to be public-spirited and belong to no party, and one's dealings not to be all for self, to move without being bound to a given course, to take things as they come, to have no remorse for the past, no anxiety for the future, to have no partialities, but to be on good terms with all. Herein lay the Tao of the ancients. Peng Meng, Tian Pian, and Shen Tao became enthusiastic followers of Tao. Their criterion was the identity of all things. The sky, said they, can cover but cannot support us. The earth can support but cannot cover us. Tao can embrace all things but cannot deal with particulars. They knew that in creation all things had their possibilities and their impossibilities. Therefore, they said, selecting excludes universality. Training will not reach in all directions, but Tao is comprehensive. Consequently, Shen Tao discarded all knowledge and self-interest and became a fatalist. Passivity was his guiding principle. For, said he, we can only know what we know nothing, and the little knowledge is a dangerous thing. Take any worthless fellow who laughs at mankind for holding virtue in esteem, any unprincipled vagabond who reveals the great sages of the world and subject him to torture. In his agony he will sacrifice positive and negative alike. If he can but get free, he will trouble no more about knowledge and forethought. Past and future will cease to exist for him, in his then neutral condition. Move when pushed, come when dragged, be like a whirling gale, like a feather in the wind, like a millstone going round. The millstone, as an existence, is perfectly harmless. In motion or at rest it does not more than it required and cannot therefore incur blame. Why? Because it is simply an inanimated thing. It has no anxieties about itself. It is never entangled in the trammels of knowledge. In motion or at rest, it is always governed by fixed laws, and therefore it never becomes open to praise. Hence it has been said, be as though an inanimate thing, and there will be no use for sages. For Claude cannot be without Tao, at which some full-blooded young book coverted the argument with ridicule by crying out, Shen Tao's Tao is not for the living but for the dead. It was the same with Tian Pian. He studied under Peng Meng, with the result that he learned nothing. Peng Meng's tutor said, those of old who knew Tao reached the point where positive and negative ceased to exist, that was all. Now the bent of these men is one of opposition, which it is difficult to discuss. They act in every way differently from other people, but cannot escape the imputation of purpose. What they call Tao is not Tao, and what they predicate affirmatively cannot escape being negative. The fact is that Peng Meng, Tian Pian, and Shen Tao did not know Tao. Nevertheless, they all had a certain acquaintance with it. To make the root the essential, to regard objective existences as accidental, to look upon accumulation as deficiency, and to meekly accept the dispositions of Providence, herein lay the Tao of the ancients. Kuan Yin and Lao Tzu became enthusiastic followers of Tao. They based their system upon nothingness, with one as their criterion. Their outward expression was gentleness and humility. Their inward belief was in unreality and avoidance of injury to all things. Kuan Yin said, adopt no absolute position, let externals take care of themselves. In motion be like water, at rest like a mirror. Respond like the echo. Be subtle, as though none existing. Be still, as though pure. Regard uniformity as peace. Look on gain as loss. Do not precede others. Follow them. Lao Tzu said, he who conscious of being strong is content to be weak. He shall be a cynosure of men. He who conscious of purity puts up with disgrace. He shall be the cynosure of mankind. He who, when others strive to be first, contents himself with the lowest place, is said to accept the contumely of the world. He who, when others strive for the substantial, contents himself with the unsubstantial, stores up nothing and therefore has abundance. There he is in the midst of his abundance, which comes to him without effort on his part. He does nothing and laughs at the artifices of others. He who, when others strive for happiness, is content with security, is said to aim at avoiding evil. He who makes depth of fundamental importance and moderation his rule of life, is said to crush that which is hard within him and temper that which is sharp. To be in liberal sympathy with all creation, and not to be aggressive towards one's fellow man, this may be called perfection. O Kuan Yin, O Lao Tzu, verily you were the true sages of old. Silence, formlessness, change, impermanence, no life, no death, heaven and earth blended in one, without departing, gone no one knows where, suddenly no one knows whither, as all things go and turn, never to come back again. Herein lay the Tao of the ancients. Chuang Tzu became an enthusiastic follower of Tao. In strange terms, in bold words, in far-reaching language, he gave free play to his thoughts without following any particular school or committing himself to any particular line. He looked on the world as so sunk in corruption that it was impossible to speak gravely. Therefore, he employed goblet words, which apply in various directions. He based his statements upon weighty authority in order to inspire confidence, and he put words in other people's mouths in order to secure breadth. In accord with the spirit of the universe, he was at peace with all creation. He judged not the rights and wrongs of mankind, and thus lived quietly in his generation. Although his book is an extraordinary production, it is plausible and harmless enough. Although his style is most irregular, it is at the same time ingenious and attractive. As a thinker, he is endlessly suggestive. Above, he roams with God. Below, he consorts with those who are beyond the pale of life and death, who deny a beginning and an end. In relation to the root, he speaks on a grand and extensive scale. In relation to Tao, he establishes a harmony between man and the higher powers. Nevertheless, he yields to the modifications of existence and responds to the exigencies of environment. His arguments are inexhaustible and never illogical. He is far-reaching, mysterious, and not to be fully explored. Hui Tzu was a man of many ideas. His works would fill 5 cards, but his doctrines are paradoxical and his terms are used ambiguously. He calls infinite smallness, within which there's nothing, the lesser one. He says that which is without dimensions measures 1,000 li, that heaven and earth are equally low, that mountain and marsh are equally level, that the sun at noon is the sun setting, that when an animal is born it dies, that the likeness of things partly unlike is called the lesser likeness of unlikes, that the likeness of things altogether unlike is called the greater likeness of unlikes, that southwards there is no limit and yet there is a limit, that one can reach you today and yet be there before, that joint rings can be separated, that the middle of the world is north of Yen and south of Yu, that he loves all creation equally, just as heaven and earth are impartial to all. Accordingly, Hui Tzu was regarded as a great philosopher and a very subtle dialectician, and became a favorite with the other dialecticians of the day. He said that there were feathers in an egg, that a fowl had 3 feet, that yin was the world, that a dog could be a sheep, that a mare could lay eggs, that a nail has a tail, that fire is not hot, that mountains have mouths, that wheels do not press down the ground, that the eye does not see, that the finger does not touch, that the uttermost extreme is not the end, that the tortoise is longer than a snake, that a carpenter's square is not a square, that compasses will not make a circle, that a round hole will not surround a square handle, that the shadow of a flying bird does not move, that there is a moment when a swiftly flying arrow is neither moving nor at rest, that a dog is not a hound, that a bay horse and a dun cow are free, that a white dog is black, that a motherless cow never had a mother, that if you take a stick a foot long and every day cut it in half, you will never come to the end of it. And such was the stuff which dialecticians used to argue about with Hui Tzu, also without ever getting to the end of it. Huan Tuan and Kung Sun Lung were of this class. By specious premises they imposed on people's minds and drove them into false conclusions. But though they won the battle in words, they did not carry convictions into their adversaries' hearts. Theirs were but the snares of a sophist. Hui Tzu daily devoted his intelligence to such pursuits, purposely advancing some preposterous thesis upon which to dispute. That was his characteristic. He had besides a great opinion of his own wisdom, and used to say, "The universe does not hold me peer." Hui Tzu makes a parade of his strength, but is devoid of any sound system. An eccentric fellow in the south named Huang Liao asked why the sky did not fall and the earth sink, also whence came wind, rain, and thunder. Hui Tzu was not backward in replying to these questions, which he answered unhesitatingly. He went into long discussions on all creation and talked about without end, though to himself he seemed to be saying very little. He supplemented this with most extraordinary statements, making it his chief object to contradict others and being desirous of gaining fame by defeating all comers. Thus he was never popular. Morally he was weak. Physically he was violent. His was a dark and narrow way. Looked at from the point of view of the Tao of the universe, the value of Hui Tzu may be compared with the efforts of a mosquito or a gadfly. Of what use was he to the world? As a specialist he might have succeeded, but to let him put himself forward as an exponent of Tao would have been dangerous indeed. He would not, however, be content to be a specialist. He must needs roam insatiable over all creation, though he only succeeded in securing the reputation of a sophist. Alas for the talents of Tzu. He is extravagantly energetic and yet has no success. He investigates all creation but does not conclude in Tao. He makes a noise to drown an echo. He is like a man running a race with his own shadow. Alas.